that for a fact.
Yeah. Um, so a lot of your books are based around being an American. Obviously, they're based around a lot of American history. What out of all the topics you could have written about back in 2004, I would assume you started writing in 2003 ish or so. Um, what compelled you to write about the 1918 influenza pandemic?
Well, I actually started in 1997,
Jesus, yeah,
so
before
it
I was
took me
even
7
born.
years to write that book.
Yeah,
Uh, so,
seven
and it
years.
was an accident. I never really intended to write the book. Uh, I had planned. Let me slide this for you a little bit more light on. Uh, the I planned to write a book about the home front in World War One, culminating in the events of 1919, which in the United States was one of the most interesting and disruptive, craziest years in American history. Um, the pandemic was part of that story, uh, but only a part. And I ended up obviously writing an entire book about the pandemic. I, in fact, tried to go back to the idea of writing about the home front in 1919 uh, and ended up writing a book about Roger Williams and the separation of church and state, which occurred 300 years before that.
Yeah,
Okay. Uh, and believe it or not, that book, which is about the 17th century, actually started with with me planning to write about the home front in World War One.
yeah. So, is that a book you'll ever actually get around to making, or nah?
Well, I don't think I'm going back to it now. I started it twice, and once I wrote a book on a pandemic, once I
Yeah,
wrote a book about the separation of church and state,
I don't know where I'll take
and
you next time.
Cromwell, and a lot of the English Civil Wars in there, and I don't think I'm going back to it.
How stressful is it writing a book about something like that? Obviously, I mean, 7 years—that's a long time to be committed to one project. So, like, how stressed? Because I'm sure you know who Robert Greene is.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of him, and I've heard he had a stroke when he was writing. I think it was the Laws of Nature. I think so. I would assume it's a very stressful endeavor.
Well, it can be, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I haven't written 20, 30 books, but obviously I've written six, working on seven and eight. Um, they all take time. Some of them are works of love almost from the beginning. Some of them are, as you say, pretty stressful. The influenza book was, uh, I would say, the hardest book that I've written. In terms, chiefly because when I started, I didn't really plan to write it. I didn't do my due diligence, I think, in planning what the book was going to be about. I sort of fell into it, and if I had done more preparation, then I might not have written it at all. Actually, uh, for the first 5.5 years, I wish I had never started.
Really?
Basically, wanted to throw everything. Yeah, there was a character in the book named Oswald Avery,
Yeah.
uh, who you know uh, ended up. Oops! No, really.
Technical difficulties. Difficulties.
I don't know why this light keeps doing that. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Avery, is a great scientist. I think he's probably the single person most deserving of a Nobel Prize who never won one,
Yeah.
at least in my view. He went, close to 20 years of publishing one scientific article. That's what scientists do. They publish articles. So he had failure after failure after failure after failure.
Mm.
Uh, but each failure, he was making some progress toward his goal. And Avery, thinking of what Avery went through, and Avery had a nervous breakdown and suffered terribly. He said, "Failure is my daily bread. I thrive on it," but he didn't thrive. Uh, anyway, thinking of his persistence sort of inspired me to keep going. Uh, and he ended up discovering that DNA carries a genetic code.
Yeah.
obviously one of the most important discoveries of the 20th century. And he launched the entire field of molecular biology. Uh, in the book, I quoted half a dozen people who did win the Nobel Prize, who gave Avery full credit for launching the whole enterprise. Uh, that's why I said earlier that I think he's arguably the single person most deserving of the prize who never won it. Uh, anyway, yeah, it was an arduous 7 years. The last year and a half, after 5.5 years, sort of everything came together.
Mm.
And the last year and a half, I won't say I coasted. I was working hard, but I knew where I was going, and it became a sort of a labor of love.
Yeah.
It had not started out that way.
Is it the book you're the most proud of?
Now, actually, I think my best book is it's probably the Roger Williams and the Creation of the American Soul, Church, State, and the Birth of Liberty.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
of course, naturally sold the least of all my books.
Yeah. The Passion Project wasn't the most successful out of all the work.